Welcome back. We are now covering Chapter 3, where we're going to be looking at exceptional students. So let's take a look at what Chapter 3 is going to include. We'll be looking at different ways of studying human development, different ways of defining intelligence, how accommodations are helpful for your students with disabilities, and also looking at ways to help struggling students. So let's start with student development. So here's an interesting question. Do all students develop in the same way? What do you think? Well, research shows us that we can create developmental models that show us typical patterns and averages of how children grow and learn. Like we know, for instance, around age 1, children begin to walk. That doesn't mean that all of them do it at age 1. Some might do it at 10 months. Some might do it at 14 months. But we can get a general idea through these sorts of developmental models and through looking at research. But we can't really broadly apply those generalizations to everyone. Not everyone fits the exact same mold. Whether this is due to environmental differences or biological differences, we are all unique. So, continuing with this question of do students all develop in the same way, what teachers need to do is use this research to try to create instructional strategies that are developmentally appropriate. So you know what your typical second grader or your typical seventh grader needs, but then still look at your individual students to see where you might need to vary things to meet their specialized needs. When we're talking about student development, there are some different ways you can conceptualize it. One way is using the stage model. Jean Piaget, very famous for a stage theorist of human development. His area was cognitive development. And stage theorists believe that human development is genetically programmed in stages. We all go through the same stages, 1, 2, 3, 4. We all go through the stages in the same order. Stages are slow and gradual, but this is how we show the qualitative differences that occur as we mature. So here's a question for you. Can anyone remember Piaget's stages of cognitive development? Anyone? Well, let's see if these look familiar to you. We're not going to go over them. They are listed in the textbook, but I do feel like this is something better saved for a different course. But you can see that he has specific stages, and they show how at each age period we think qualitatively differently. All right, that is not the only way to look at student development, but when you are using a stage model, you believe in something called maturation, which is the idea that these stages are genetically and biologically pre-programmed, and they unfold almost on their own. And they cannot be significantly impacted by the environment. Now, more current researchers do believe that parents and teachers can provide enriching opportunities to help foster and promote growth through these stages, and I do greatly believe in that, but we do think that the stages themselves are somehow hardwired. Here's an example of how opportunities provided by parents and teachers can make a difference. So let me find my laser pointer. Okay, so here's one child, and you can see they were read to a great deal, 20 minutes a day. And let's compare over here, this child that was only read 1 minute a day. Look at the big difference in the number of words they have per school year. And we'll look at data like this a little bit later on in this chapter, but it does show how by providing opportunities, you can really enrich their cognitive development. Okay, there's another model for looking at student development, and that is brain development. So we know that the brain develops throughout childhood, and along with this, you're going to see motor skills, cognitive skills come about in kind of an orderly fashion. Brain development researchers do believe that enriching environments do provide the stimulation that is needed to help promote that kind of growth. We also know that sensitive periods exist, that there are certain periods in your timeline of growth that are more sensitive to certain types of stimuli than others. So here's a chart that I found. So you can see all different things to look at, whether it's numbers or pure social skills, emotional control, or so on. And you can see where those sensitive periods are for acquiring or learning those skills. So here's a question for you, and you might have guessed this from looking at the previous chart. What age range do you think is the most critical for brain development? Well, if any of you guessed birth to 3, ding ding, you're right. Those first 3 years are crucial for brain development. So I want to make sure you do have that in your notes. The early years, the first 3, extremely significant for brain development. Very important time period. All right, here's another chart. This one is from your book, showing you the development of the brain at different ages. And again, you can see here's the first 3 years. You can see the amazing amount of growth that occurs there. When it comes to looking at findings from brain research, some other things that we have found is that excessive stress early in life can disrupt brain development. You can look at this photo down below, looking at a 3-year-old, comparing the brains of a normal 3-year-old and one that suffered extreme neglect. And you can see this is a significant difference in size. There's a difference in the number of neural connections, and this can lead to various academic problems, whether it deals with memory as well as behavior issues. But the good news is the brain is extremely plastic. I don't mean that literally. By plasticity, I mean that the brain is able to change and still continue to grow and develop. So it does continue to grow and develop through childhood. So enriching environments can sometimes overcome early stressors. All right, let's move on to a new topic. Let's take a look at exceptional students. I think it's probably good to start with this question: who is exceptional? What do you think that term means, to be exceptional? Well, there are a couple of ways you can use it. Exceptional students are students who are considered to be gifted and talented. Exceptional students are also students with disabilities. And there are many schools of thought and teachers who say that exceptional also includes any student who is struggling. So if you have a student who's struggling in math but doing fine everywhere else, that could be considered an exceptional student because they do need some sort of assistance. Also, students who are dealing with excessive stress or trauma. And there are some educators who say, you know what, all children are exceptional because they're all different in some way. They're all extraordinary in some way. So while we're talking about things like exceptionalities, and I also mentioned gifted and talented students, it's important to understand what is intelligence, because that is one of the measures that we use to determine which students are gifted and talented. So is intelligence one ability, or is it a bunch of abilities? The typical model when we first started studying intelligence was the idea of IQ. IQ stands for intelligence quotient. It is one score, with the idea of intelligence being one ability. It's determined by an intelligence test called the Stanford-Binet Intelligence Scales. So it measures just your general intelligence. Now that is different from what you know. Tests that study what do you know right now, those are achievement tests. Intelligence tests are different. They're trying to look at how well can you problem solve, how well can you think through things, can you understand something that you've read. It's really a way of looking at your potential and your ability to learn. So when you're looking at the Stanford-Binet Intelligence Scale, over here, I'll get my little laser pointer out, you can see the typical bell curve. Students who score 130 or above are considered to be gifted. Those who score 70 or below are considered to have challenges within the world of cognitive development and might require some sort of accommodations, obviously. Here are some of the typical items you might see on the Stanford-Binet Intelligence Scale for younger children. So it might be looking at your ability to do math. There are a variety of tangram puzzles on there to look at your visual spatial skills, as well as pattern recognition, memory. You can see it's a very interesting inventory. It does have to be administered by a professional. You really can't just take it online or get a copy of it and take it at home. Professionals go through a great deal of training to understand how to administer it and how to score it appropriately. All right, so here's another question for you. Can you be intelligent in some areas, but not others? Because remember, IQ is just one score, bam. What if you have strengths in some areas, but not all? Howard Gardner is a very famous educational psychologist and psychologist in general who created the idea of multiple intelligences. So multiple intelligences, the idea that there's more than one way of looking at intelligence. So here's a question for you. Can you think of an area where you have exceptional skill? Something you're just really good at? Well, if so, do you see it listed here? Perhaps are you great with visual spatial skills, and maybe you're great at video games, or you're great at those kinds of puzzles. Linguistic skills. Are you great with articulating what you want to say or writing poetry? Interpersonal skills. You're really good with getting along with others and reading other people. You can see below, these are all of the areas of multiple intelligences. So there are 8 different areas of multiple intelligences that Howard Gardner created and studied in his research. Each person is considered to have strengths in some areas and weaknesses in others. So multiple intelligence doesn't mean the idea that you are strong in all of these. It's the idea that you have strengths in some, but perhaps not in others. Let's look a bit more in depth at this idea of multiple intelligences, and we'll start with a video.
For many years, educators measured human intelligence by one factor, our IQ, or intelligence quotient. And IQ was thought to determine how well we did in school, in life, in everything. However, Harvard professor and Brock laureate Howard Gardner challenged this notion with his theory of multiple intelligences, which states that we actually have a number of different intellectual capacities, including language, logical mathematical analysis, spatial representation, musical thinking, the use of the body to solve problems or to make things, an understanding of other individuals, as well as an understanding of ourselves and our fit in the world. We all differ in the various combinations of intelligences and how we use our intelligences to carry out different tasks, solve diverse problems, and grow as human beings. These differences challenge educational systems that assume that everyone can learn the same materials in the same way, and that a standardized, universal measure is sufficient to test student learning. For example, traditional education is heavily biased toward linguistic modes of instruction, or the sage on the stage model. As contrast, the theory of multiple intelligences presupposes that we would better serve our students and society as a whole if disciplines and subject matter could be presented and learning could be assessed through a variety of ways. Recognizing different types of intelligence brings out the best in students. It helps them discover their inherent talents and gifts. Learn more about Howard Gardner's multiple intelligences at the bin.
So hopefully that was helpful, just to give another way of talking about and looking at multiple intelligences. When it comes to gifted and talented students, about 10% of the population is considered to be gifted and talented based upon the bell curve. And that data is from the National Association of Gifted Children. But about 6.4% of public school children are actually enrolled in gifted and talented programs. So why the difference in numbers? That's a pretty big difference. Not all schools have gifted and talented programs. So it's possible that you have a good number of gifted and talented students that simply are at schools that don't offer those programs. When you look at gifted and talented students in the school system, there's a pretty even distribution of males and females, but not an even distribution when you look at ethnic identity. It is a much higher proportion of Caucasian and Asian American students. All right, so that was a bit of a subtopic, looking at intelligence and gifted and talented students, which is one way students can be an exceptional. Another way students can be an exceptional, and this is the way we usually talk about exceptionalities, is students who have disabilities. So, what is a disability? It is basically a condition that you have that is chronic or long-lasting, that is going to significantly impact your learning. And the way it impacts your learning is by impacting your physical, your emotional, or your mental activities. Okay, so that obviously would be a barrier in the classroom. How do we identify if a student has a disability? Well, either the child's parent or the student's teacher would notice something that might cause concern, and they would need to refer that student for evaluation to a professional, most likely a psychologist. After the evaluation, there's a time period of 30 days once the evaluation is received by the school that an IEP team must meet to look at the information provided, the diagnostic information, and determine how to best meet that student's needs. So, how can teachers and schools assist? First is the IEP team. The IEP team can vary depending upon the school district, but it usually is comprised of parents, teachers, any special educators from the school or the school system, and any other type of specialist that might be relevant to the student's disability. And you can see down below a variety of professionals who might make up the IEP team. This is just a sample that I found to give you an idea of the IEP planning form, the things that they might look at. So they might go through all of the regular class activities and say, okay, what are some things that this particular student needs assistance with or needs to work on in things like arrival at school or language arts classes or so on. The IEP team will develop a list of accommodations, and these are things that the teacher needs to do to try to help the student learn best in that environment, services that the student is required to have. Now, there are a lot of different categories of disabilities. This chart here is from our textbook, and it does show the more common types of disabilities, and you can see here the most common ones. We're going to take a peek at these 4 since they are the most common that you're likely to see in the classroom. And first, now I'll go back real quick. First is learning disabilities, which you can see is almost 35% of the disabilities that you would be seeing. So what is a learning disability? So this is where the student, they can understand the content, but it either takes them longer to understand the content or they simply need a different way of being taught, a different way of learning it, that the standard way is not working for them because of their disability. Perhaps they have difficulty using the spoken word or understanding spoken word. Maybe they have difficulty with writing. They have some sort of a disability that affects their ability to listen, think, read, write, spell, speak, and do math. So you can see over here some of the things that might be included in that. Some of the ones that might be more familiar to you might be dyslexia or dysgraphia, dysphasia. Here's a short video on dyslexia and IQ because there's a misconception that students who have dyslexia are not intelligent. And it is simply that they need to learn differently. So let's take a look at this.
Children with dyslexia who struggle to read often conclude they're not smart enough to understand the material. But the research says that's wrong. For typically developing children, IQ and reading ability are linked. According to a 2010 study, they track together over time and mutually reinforce one another. But for children with dyslexia, a gap between IQ and reading ability appears in the early grades and then widens over time. Dyslexia, it turns out, can be deceptive. Children with the condition often struggle with reading, but it's a mistake to connect that to intelligence. They are just as bright as other students and every bit as capable of mastering the material. So be sure to be patient and encouraging with your students with dyslexia. Remember, it's not a race. And try to offer them a range of tools like audiobooks, visual aids, text-to-speech apps or videos. Finally, don't define them by their disability. Focus on their strengths instead.
I thought that might be a helpful way of looking at and understanding a common learning disability such as dyslexia. The second most common one is a speech or language impairment. These are also categorized as communication disorders. So this could involve a student who has difficulty stuttering when they speak. Maybe there are certain sounds that they cannot make, or they have a hard time with putting their thoughts into articulating them into words. I recall whenever I was young, I had a speech impairment. I was unable to say the sound for R. And I spent a great deal of time with a speech therapist trying to learn how to say for railroad and other words like that. And it was something that I'm grateful that I had the speech therapist because I was able to overcome that. Next, we have autism spectrum disorder. So this is a developmental disorder that you typically see during the first year of life. It is one that does start pretty early. I thought I'd ask this as a question because this is one that, has become a bit more common knowledge. What do you think are some of the indicators for autism spectrum disorder? And by indicators, I mean, what are the signs? What do you see during that first year or so of life? Any thoughts? All right, check what you thought of to this list. Let's see, over here. Over there. It's reversed for the camera. Okay, so very early indicators, things like a child that has not started babbling even by age of 1. Typically what you see are a lot of language delays. You also see where they might gain language and then lose it. You might see problems with social skills like eye contact, and you might also see some repetitive behaviors. And here are some indicators you might also see later in life that are similar to the earlier ones, just a bit more mature for older children. Here's a short video on helping students who have autism learn in your classroom. All right, there we go.
Research shows that if the student's in the right mindset and they get their sensory needs met, they're going to be much better learners. So after the sensory room, they're able to focus more. They're able to learn easier, and they retain more information, I find.
Hands to your heart space. Take a deep breath in.
Children should be and deserve to be educated within their district and within their school community. In Meriden, we have approximately 1,200 students who have individualized educational plans, students with vision difficulties, language difficulties, autism.
So here at Hanover School, we have our STARS Autism program, and STARS stands for Students and Teachers Achieving Remarkable Success.
So River, what did we do yesterday? What book did we read?
So autism presents throughout a very broad spectrum. A lot of times it's a social issue. Some of them demonstrate behaviors because they are not able to communicate their needs.
They may have difficulty sitting still for a long period of time.
They need different sensory breaks throughout the day so they can self-regulate their feelings and emotions.
Take some deep breaths here.
The sensory room is probably my most important piece of the day. Students go to the sensory room in order to calm their bodies and get all the emotions out and stabilize themselves so they're ready to learn and they're happy.
When we designed the sensory room, we actually took the entire room apart. We carpeted the floor so that we could absorb some of the sound. We put the shades on the ceiling to change the light. So when they walk in that room, they feel the change. All the students in this school go by that room and want to go in there.
It's actually not just for the STARS program, it's for any student in the whole school that might be having a tough day. My class specifically, we utilize the room once a day for a 30-minute break, and then once a week we have physical therapists that work with our students.
First thing that they do is go on the ball and they bounce to a metronome.
Hold.
We work with the breathing to calm them.
Breath in.
And then we move into some yoga. It's really a way to ground them into the space before we have them go out into the room.
All right, my friends, we're going to do our rotation now, okay?
So there's different stations in the sensory room, and some of my students love specific stations. One in particular loves the punching bag and the ropes. He's able to get all that anger and frustration out, so that calms him down. Whereas another student, I know he needs calming movements, so he's on the swing going back and forth.
Another area in the room is the crash pad. You will see students that have sensory issues bump into walls, bang their head. So what we've created is a safe space to crash into. And then there's the light wall. You could use your hands, you could use your feet. There's different games that are programmed on there. And really what you're doing is hitting something and getting all that input back into your joints.
Yes, good girl.
We also work on balance and coordination. The walking path works on all of those, and that affects your vestibular system, which is your inner ear, and they have to right themselves, correct their body in space. We have 10-pound slam balls. Some students just need to come in, pick something heavy up and throw it. That's the essence of a sensory room. You're putting materials in there that are appropriate, so a student's not throwing a chair. And at the end, when they finish with their stations, they lay on the floor and they're squished to give them more input so that they're prepared to leave the room. So everything that we do in there is predictable. There's a set sequence.
We're all done with sensory room. We're going to walk back to our class.
So we have found that the impact of the sensory room has increased time on task, and it has decreased negative behaviors. So the kids are able to sit in their seat and stay focused for longer periods of time.
I don't know about you all, but I think that seems like an amazing school and some great resources that they're providing for students to help them learn, to help them focus and feel more balanced within the classroom. Okay, while we're talking about students with disabilities, it's important to know some background. So if you've heard the acronym IDEA, that stands for Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. This is an act that ensures that children with disabilities have the opportunity to have free and appropriate public education, and that this requires that students with disabilities be educated with regular students whenever possible and in as normal as an environment as possible. It's the idea of inclusion rather than separation. The student's IEP will specify exactly what kinds of accommodations or modifications that student might need in the classroom. And the school should have a special educator there to assist with this process. Here's some ideas of some things that you might see in terms of accommodations. You might have a student that needs extra time, that has to have more frequent breaks, that perhaps they're allowed to give their answers orally rather than writing them down, that perhaps you might need to reduce the reading level on assignments, and so on. So I mentioned the term inclusion on one of the previous slides. What is inclusion? Inclusion is the idea of integrating students with disabilities into your regular classroom. I love this diagram here on the side. So here's exclusion, where you have your students with exceptionalities who are being kept away from the regular or traditional classroom. Here is segregation, where they have their own class. So exclusion means they're not part of the class. Segregation means they have a class, they're just separate. Integration, they're in the classroom, but they're still separated in some way, even though they might physically be there. And this would be full inclusion. The goal is try to make sure that your students are able to access educational opportunities, participate in them, engage in them at a level that is appropriate for them, as well as not being disruptive to the other students. Here's a short video looking at inclusion on the playground.
Play and playgrounds are so important for children because play is the way that we learn to connect with the world. at Inclusion Matters by Shane's Inspiration, we create inclusive playgrounds and provide workshops for teachers that help them to understand the importance of social inclusion.
Fostering social inclusion for my students is so important because that gives them the opportunity to make our classroom a safe space and hopefully create a better and more inclusive world.
Let's do the sign for play. There's play. Who remembers swing? It's very similar like swing, or like play. Yep, it's kind of front and back, okay? Very good.
So our education program is called Together We Are Able. The design and the intent of the program is for children to have a candid discussion around disability, experience that conversation through play, and then to sum it up at the end so that all of those perceptions and misconceptions are sort of put to rest. What does the word disability mean to you?
It means that they can't really do lots of things. They can't do the things that we could do as a person without disabilities.
Some of the misconceptions and assumptions that students talk about in that pre-conversation has to do with how they define disability. Well, if you're in a wheelchair, you can't do anything. That is common, and there's no judgment, and there can be no judgment on that with students because that is their limited experience.
Well, when I see somebody in a wheelchair, I kind of feel bad for them, like they can't really adapt and play with me, and I think that's really sad.
During the pre-visit, because students don't feel like they're being taught or talked at, they know, okay, this is something that I can learn from, and here now are some tips and tools and tricks that I can use, and then they take off running, sometimes literally.
That second step is the playground experience, and that's where we purposefully connect children together in buddy groups, and then through play, they can physically experience everything that we talked about. The introductions are super important. You come down to eye level and we make the connection. Once they've done that and all students are comfortable, then they take their buddy and everybody explores the playground and they play.
Ooh, everybody come down low.
Hi.
And who's this?
My buddy was Parker, and we both had this excitement when we first met each other. I introduced myself, he introduced himself, and then that moment on, I held his hand. He just didn't let go.
I think it's really important for students in my class to understand that this is someone that you can learn from. This isn't about you helping someone. That can be part of it, certainly, but it's also about what gifts do both buddies on both ends have to bring to each other.
It makes my heart feel really warm. I just feel so good.
We like playing with you, Nika. Yeah.
1, 2, 3.
And then we come back in and we do a debrief, or what we call a post-conversation. And that really is a time for students from the typically developing class to synthesize what they experience. Raise your hand if you had a good time getting to know your buddy, right? Was there anything that this time with your buddy taught you?
Don't judge a book by its cover, and everybody's different in their own way, just to make sure that everybody's being included.
I like that. We have a lot more things in common than not.
I think it's really important to get kids talking about inclusivity at a wide level. My students are going to be going into a very diverse world, and the more that they're able to be inclusive of others, the better they're going to make the world around them.
You want to go on the other slide now?
Talk to your principal. Come up with something small that you can start with. Maybe it's a conversation at your staff meeting. If you're a general education teacher, find a special ed teacher that would want to partner with you. Start the conversation.
If I could...
What a great video, as well as an excellent program. I love how they start off with open conversation and discussion, experience, and then wrap it up. I think it's a really lovely program and a way to really look at inclusion. In an inclusive classroom, the students are in the same class, but they may not necessarily always learn the same way. There might be differentiation based upon the needs of the student, based upon their IEPs. Okay, this is going to be where we pause. It's not the end, but it is the end of Chapter 3, Part 1. I don't want this video to get too long. So make sure that you watch Chapter 3, Part 2 to be fully prepared. Thank you for your attention.